So with a slight delay, we welcome you to this shared network webinar on participation and co-creation for refugees and migrant integration. And we are extremely happy that you have made some time available to join us for this webinar. And I know that these days before Christmas, there are thousands of things to do. So we hope to make this extremely a very worthwhile exercise for you, because this is one of the subjects we have been looking at for quite a long time. And we are very happy with you to look at some practices, at some research and some lessons learned. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to my dear colleague, Rachel Westerby, for the first interventions. Rachel, go ahead.
Hi, do you hear me well?
Yeah, a bit louder maybe.
And now, do you hear me? Okay, wonderful. I just want to check also that my presentation is on screen. If someone could say yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this morning. I hope you forgive our small technical issues, which we're working on in the background. I just wanted to start with a brief introduction to SHARE and to the topic of the webinar, to put that in context in terms of what SHARE is planning to do in the next 2.5 years, and also to put it a bit in the EU policy context. So I know a lot of people that are here today are familiar with SHARE, but just as by way of an introduction, SHARE was established in 2012, although it was in our thinking from 2011 onwards. So we're approaching the 10th anniversary of the idea of SHARE. SHARE is a platform for mutual exchange and learning amongst local and regional actors working on refugee and migrant protection and integration. So we started working very much on refugee resettlement in Europe. And we've since kind of really expanded to look at integration across the piece, and particularly in the local and regional context. The kind of broad model of SHARE, I think, is bottom-up development, capacity building and practice exchange, mutual support and so on, and top-level advocacy. So our intensive work at grassroots level is coupled with advocacy for better integration and inclusion in Europe. In 2018-19, I should say that SHARE was particularly focused on building capacity for welcome and integration, smaller communities and rural areas, rural territories. This was particularly in the context of the general situation in Europe since 2015 or from 2015. And also to kind of recognition of the role that those smaller and more rural communities were playing in welcoming refugees, the long-standing role they have in welcoming migrants. So that was the focus of SHARE in 2018-19. So just in terms of the SHARE network in this period, you can say from our kind of collective experience of the last 9 or 10 years, we've developed some key principles and approaches that are really born of kind of the knowledge and the information and our experience of working with stakeholders at the local regional level. And the key approach for us, certainly in terms of engaging smaller and rural communities in integration and supporting refugees and migrants, are territorial approaches, by which we mean evidence-based and a kind of evidence-based multi-stakeholder engagement model of providing for welcome, integration and inclusion in a particular territory. So here our model is very much kind of mainstreaming integration support and providing specialist support for newcomers and for vulnerable groups. I would dare point to our response to the Integration Action Plan that was recently launched by the European Commission, and which I'll talk about later, in which we urged really, we welcome multi-stakeholder engagement, of course, and multi-level governance as kind of effective approaches for good integration and inclusion. But we also urge there a continued focus on support for newcomers and for vulnerable groups within that, particularly those arriving via dedicated protection programs. I think what we're doing now, SHARE, is as many other networks, we're thinking about how to really consistently mainstream refugee participation across all of the activities and partnerships of the network. So Share has made a great deal of effort to have refugees participate, particularly in Share. Since the network was established, we have kind of ongoing partnerships with refugee and migrant-led organizations. We had a refugee resettlement ambassador program, which provided training, capacity building, and invited ambassadors to take part in discussions at regional, local, and national and EU level. And we've consistently involved refugees as speakers and discussants in our activities. But I think what we want to do now is to make that more consistent and more meaningful. And I think that's a kind of common theme across lots of networks and organizations working in this area at the moment. So in terms of the coming period, Share is undertaking a renewed mapping of practices, stakeholders, and networks and integration. So kind of a consolidation of our knowledge, but particularly in the context of the current COVID-19 situation. So we're mapping and assessing practices that have been.
Rachel,
Yeah.
you speak too loud, and not loud enough and too fast. And the interpreter in French asked you to slow down. I'm sorry.
Okay. No problem. I can do that. Thank you. Thanks for the question. Yeah. So Share in 2020 to 23. I was talking about the situation currently with COVID-19. So Share has been mapping and assessing practices that have been developed in response to that new health situation in the context of integration and inclusion. You have, I think, 3 more days to respond to our survey, which is linked from our website, to submit your practices, your ideas, and your feedback about how the situation is currently, and what practice is happening that you would like to highlight in the context of Share. Particularly relevant for today are the last 3 bullet points here for Share's activities in the coming period. So we're extremely interested in a co-creation and participatory approaches for integration. So we see that in many European countries, co-creation approaches are used very often in social care sectors, in the health sector, but they're perhaps not so well used in integration. So there are some examples of good practice, and we'll hear many of them today in the agenda. But we want to see a kind of a more consistent approach and a more consistent use of these types of approaches and integration. We think they could be of great value. And we also consider that in terms of territorial approaches, participatory and co-creation approaches can really support kind of solid cooperation frameworks that involve all relevant stakeholders. And of course, our interest, particularly at the local level and the regional level, is that refugees, migrants, and host communities are involved in developing, implementing, and evaluating integration policies and programs. Our top level advocacy, of course, we'd advocate for the inclusion of participatory approaches in relevant EU policy and funding instruments. And particularly within the next period, we'll be developing and piloting these approaches in partnership with actors in smaller and rural territories. So again, the evidence-based approach. So in terms of our EU integration policy and funding, as I mentioned before, there is a new EU action plan for integration and inclusion, which will cover the 2021 to 27 period. So it's a substantial period that this plan will be in place for. In terms of participation within that plan, there are, I would say, some really encouraging signs and some really encouraging ways in which participation has been highlighted in that document, and so in the kind of policy thinking at the EU level. So we see there a very clear statement, which has always been there since the Common Basic Principles, actually, but now it's much better outlined. I would say that migrant participation and refugee participation in consultation and decision making and policy making and in developing integration programs and activities makes policies and programs more effective, more responsive to actual needs. The plan really emphasizes multi-stakeholder cooperation for integration, especially at local level involving migrants, refugees, and host communities, which is precisely the type of work that Share will be undertaking in the next period. The plan also commits some EU financing to build the capacity of public authorities, national, regional, and local level, to involve migrants and migrant organizations in decision making. So that support is there, the financial support is there from the EU level. The plan also reiterates, I would say, that migrants and migrant organizations should be involved in the design, implementation, and evaluation of all integration and inclusion policies and programs. I mean, this is ambitious. And there is an existing requirement that this type of involvement happens in the EU funding programs. But the recommendation in the plan is that that should be across the piece, regardless of where funding comes from. In terms of funding, we are now at the start of a new, or just coming up to the start of a new multi-annual financial period in the EU. So the new Asylum, Migration (brackets and Integration) Fund for 2021-27 has been politically agreed, and the technical agreement is pending. At the national level, national authorities are preparing the national programs for the coming period under the AMIF, and also under other EU funds that support integration and inclusion, particularly the European Social Fund and others. We see, I think, that the partnership principle at national level is not always consistently applied. So there should be the involvement of a wide range of stakeholders in preparing national programs. So for those working at national level, I think now is the time to be asking the questions about what's happening with developing those plans and who is being involved and who is being consulted. I just wanted to draw your attention here to the statement at the bottom of the screen. This is from civil society and UNHCR advocacy statement on the AMIF, just before the political agreement was reached, saying very clearly that refugees and migrants really are the kind of prime observers of how integration policies and programs work, from the EU level, at the national level, or at the local level. So there's a kind of a wealth of experience and a wealth of knowledge that's there that really would help to effectively program EU money and also national money, local money, whichever resources it is, and to make those interventions more responsive to needs and much more cost efficient. So in terms of today's webinar, before I hand over, so our objectives today, I think this is really the first step in SHARE's program of work in this area for 2021-23. So what we want to do today really is to share good practices and lessons learned in implementing either participatory or co-creation approaches for refugee and migrant integration. And we also want to hear in the course of presenting our practices what the key considerations are when implementing these types of approaches with refugees and migrants as distinct from other sectors. The initial conclusions of today's webinar will be published in early 21. That's alongside the outcomes of the survey and our broader research and mapping on integration during the COVID-19 period. And the key conclusions today will really act as a basis for our activities and our advocacy during 21 to 23. I think what we found is when we began kind of researching this particular area of practice, there is a lot of good work that's happening. And then what I hope we will be able to do is hold another webinar, another discussion, and hopefully highlight some of those practices that weren't on the agenda today. So I think that's all I wanted to say about share for now, and I will unshare my screen. And maybe I will hand over then to our colleague, Sophie.
Thank you, Rachel. Merci beaucoup. Je vais faire ma présentation en français et je vais essayer de parler très doucement pour être sûre que les interprètes ne me détestent pas à la fin de cette intervention. Merci beaucoup au réseau Share de nous proposer cet échange, de pouvoir partir d'exemples concrets de certains pays. Et donc moi, je travaille pour un observatoire de l'immigration et de l'asile qui dépend d'un institut de recherche français, l'Institut français des relations internationales. Et dans le cadre de cet observatoire, nous avons interrogé une série d'acteurs, des associations, des représentants de pouvoirs publics, des citoyens qui s'engagent auprès de réfugiés ou de migrants et des personnes exilées elles-mêmes qui sont actrices de programmes d'accueil et d'intégration en France, qui ont créé leur association ou en tout cas qui s'intéressent à cette question de la participation des personnes concernées. Donc, comment en France, cette question de la participation est comprise par les acteurs? Est-ce qu'on a beaucoup de projets qui sont pensés avec les personnes concernées ou au contraire, est-ce que ces projets sont encore rares et comment on pourrait favoriser une plus grande prise en compte du savoir des personnes exilées, de leur savoir de vie, mais aussi de leur savoir d'expérience à leur arrivée en France ou en Europe de façon générale. L'interprétation marche pas, j'ai jamais parlé aussi doucement. Vous me faites signe quand je peux continuer?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you.
I can hear you very well, yeah.
Ok. Et là, il y a un partage d'écran qui n'a... Someone share the screen, but it doesn't... Intéressant. Je continue? Ok. C'est bon, Rachel?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
no, please continue. Can I ask everyone who's not presenting, could you please cut your video and your audio, and also don't share your screen because it interferes with the presenters.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Donc, les questionnements, c'était à la fois de mettre en évidence des programmes et des actions qui sont vraiment pensées avec les personnes exilées et de réfléchir à la démarche de certaines structures ou aussi de collectivités locales qui veulent de plus en plus tenir compte de la parole des personnes exilées pour construire leur programme d'accueil et d'intégration. Le constat de départ, c'est qu'en France, au fond, il y a assez peu d'expériences qui vraiment tiennent compte de la parole et qui construisent les programmes avec les personnes. On a plutôt eu l'occasion d'échanger avec des associations qui consultent les personnes exilées, c'est-à-dire qui leur demandent leur avis à l'issue d'un projet ou qui leur demandent au moment de l'évaluation de pouvoir donner leur ressenti et de pouvoir s'exprimer sur les attentes qu'ils avaient. Est-ce que le programme a répondu à leurs attentes? Est-ce que voilà, ils ont des suggestions? Mais ces enquêtes qu'on pourrait qualifier d'enquêtes de satisfaction ou ces groupes de parole, à notre sens, sont un niveau assez bas de participation, c'est-à-dire on demande juste en tant qu'utilisateur d'une politique et non pas en considérant les personnes exilées comme en capacité de construire le programme avec ceux qui le mettent en œuvre. Donc un autre niveau de participation qu'on a appelé, enfin en tout cas qu'on a identifié dans un certain nombre d'associations, c'est la co-construction. Donc comment certaines associations impliquent des personnes exilées dès le démarrage d'un programme, comment elles construisent avec les personnes qui arrivent, avec leur savoir, leur talent et comment on part vraiment des personnes exilées pour construire des projets. Ça, c'est le cas d'un assez petit nombre d'associations en France, mais qui, en termes de méthode, sont vraiment dans l'échange et analysent leurs pratiques. Par exemple, tout à l'heure, il y aura une intervention de l'association JRS, le service G18 pour les réfugiés. Et en tout cas, dans leur programme avec les jeunes, ils sont vraiment dans partir des savoirs des personnes et dans un objectif de construire avec les personnes exilées qui arrivent et non pas d'avoir construit en amont et de leur proposer de participer. Une autre expérience dans une association, un projet qui est porté par le Secours catholique, Caritas, c'est un lieu d'accueil pour des demandeurs d'asile et les bénévoles de ce projet sont pour moitié des personnes exilées. Et donc, vraiment, il y a l'idée d'accueillir une personne exilée, d'être accueillie par un de ses pairs et de pouvoir échanger de façon, sur un pied d'égalité et de permettre aussi aux personnes exilées de développer leurs capacités, non seulement de partir de leur expérience, mais aussi de devenir plus à l'aise avec les démarches administratives, avec la diffusion de l'information. Donc finalement, au travers de ce projet, les personnes exilées qui sont engagées comme bénévoles développent vraiment leur pouvoir d'agir. dernier exemple sur ce bénévolat qu'on pourrait qualifier d'inclusif. Il y a, enfin, un exemple en tout cas, il y a une étude qui vient d'être réalisée par le Haut Commissariat aux réfugiés des Nations Unies en France sur l'engagement des personnes exilées comme bénévoles dans différentes structures, que ce soit des structures qui soient très inventives sur cette question de la participation ou des lieux associatifs qui juste font une place à des citoyens, qu'importe qu'ils soient exilés ou non. Donc, vous pourrez, je vous donnerai les références de cette étude si ça vous intéresse d'avoir des exemples concrets d'engagement, notamment dans le cadre de cette crise sanitaire. Et puis, troisième niveau de participation, c'est la gouvernance partagée. Donc là aussi, certaines associations en France travaillent à faire une place aux personnes exilées dans les instances de décision, dans les lieux où on pense vraiment les projets. Donc, par exemple, les conseils d'administration ou des réunions un peu stratégiques sur comment on va développer un projet et comment on va le développer à partir de l'expérience des personnes exilées notamment. Ces associations, elles ne sont pas très nombreuses non plus, y compris des associations très impliquées sur la participation des personnes. Ben, finalement, ça ne va pas jusqu'à ces lieux de décision. Et puis l'autre exemple sur cette gouvernance partagée, c'est évidemment les associations qui ont été fondées par des personnes migrantes ou exilées ou réfugiés. Et là, la question de la participation, j'allais dire, ne se pose pas puisque les personnes exilées ont elles-mêmes fondé leur association et donc évidemment qu'elles participent et qu'elles sont à tous les échelons de décision dans ce type d'association. Ouais, je vois plein de messages, mais si vous voulez me parler, il faut m'interrompre parce que je ne peux pas lire en même temps. Voilà, donc ça, c'était les 3 niveaux de participation qu'on a pu identifier dans les associations. Et ensuite, on s'est intéressé à la question plus des politiques. Et alors, en France, au niveau national, parce que l'accueil et l'intégration des réfugiés et des migrants, c'est une compétence de l'État en France. Il n'y a pas d'instance de consultation nationale qui permette à des personnes réfugiées d'être consultées régulièrement ou voilà, il y a des consultations ponctuelles par des parlementaires, par exemple, qui font des auditions et qui auditionnent entre autres des personnes exilées sur ces sujets, mais donc pas encore d'instance nationale. Et le travail enfin voilà, notre étude a permis d'échanger un peu plus avant avec une délégation interministérielle à l'accueil et à l'intégration des réfugiés en France, donc une délégation qui dépend du ministère de l'Intérieur, donc dont c'est la compétence de s'occuper des questions d'immigration et d'asile en France. Et cette délégation, donc la DIER, va expérimenter un projet qui permet à des personnes exilées de se former à la prise de parole et à ce que ça veut dire partir de son expérience personnelle pour orienter la politique, en tout cas donner son avis de façon plus globale. Mais donc ce projet d'académie pour la participation des réfugiés vous sera présenté un peu plus tard par Frédéric Faraboz. Deuxième point sur les politiques, au niveau local, il nous est apparu que les villes étaient un espace privilégié de participation pour les personnes exilées. En effet, les villes dont finalement l'accueil des populations étrangères n'est pas une compétence, en tout cas ils n'ont pas des budgets spécifiques pour ça, de fait sont un lieu où des nouveaux citoyens arrivent. Et donc il y a une série de villes en France qui vraiment prennent cette question à bras le corps et qui, parce qu'ils ont une attention à la participation des citoyens en général, finalement organisent enfin voilà, proposent des programmes, entre autres pour les personnes exilées, et ont une attention pour que ces personnes exilées participent effectivement à ces projets. Donc, il y a des initiatives de participation, de démocratie participative, telles que des budgets participatifs. On propose aux gens de déposer des projets. Dans certaines villes de France, par exemple la ville de Grenoble, ces budgets participatifs sont ouverts à tous les citoyens, quelle que soit leur nationalité, quel que soit leur statut relatif au droit de séjour, par exemple. Et donc, toutes ces personnes peuvent déposer des projets et ces projets peuvent ensuite être financés par par la collectivité. Donc voilà, ces démarches-là montrent que au niveau local, il y a vraiment des initiatives qui veulent tenir compte de la parole et de la pensée des personnes exilées de façon très concrète dans leur quotidien en tant que citoyens habitants d'une ville. Je vais aller un peu vite pour juste arriver aux recommandations qu'on a faites dans cette étude. Donc, une première chose, on a mis en évidence un certain nombre d'outils, c'est-à-dire de façons de favoriser la participation des personnes exilées. Donc ça, c'est une partie qui est plus destinée aux travailleurs sociaux, aux professionnels de terrain, sur comment j'ai l'intention de faire participer, mais qu'est-ce que je dois adapter dans mon travail quotidien pour vraiment permettre une participation qui ne soit pas juste une consultation. Et puis ensuite, on a fait des recommandations qui, elles, sont plus à destination des responsables associatifs ou des pouvoirs publics. Parmi ces recommandations, je vais vous en partager quelques-unes. Premièrement, on a construit ces recommandations avec les personnes qu'on avait interrogées dans le cadre de cette étude. Ce qui est apparu, c'est que il y a dans des centres d'accueil, par exemple pour demandeurs d'asile, il y a des réunions qui sont organisées pour permettre la participation des personnes. Et donc ça, c'est inscrit dans la loi depuis 2002 en France. Alors, ça marche plus ou moins bien, mais ce qui est apparu, c'est que si les personnes à qui on demande de se réunir et d'avoir des projets pour leur collectif, si elles n'ont pas des financements qui vont avec, si elles n'ont pas de budget pour mettre en œuvre les actions qu'elles peuvent avoir inventées, au fond, c'est une participation qui s'arrête au fait de se réunir et d'échanger des idées. Donc, ce qu'on recommande, c'est qu'il y ait un budget de fonctionnement pour ces instances, pour que vraiment la participation, elle puisse se transformer en action et qu'elle puisse avoir un réel impact. La deuxième recommandation que je vous partage, c'est d'inclure la participation des personnes exilées dans les critères d'évaluation des programmes des associations. Considérer que ce critère, est-ce que j'ai consulté régulièrement? Est-ce que j'ai permis à des personnes de monter en compétences, de proposer, de porter des projets? Ça doit être un critère pour évaluer l'efficacité d'un programme et de considérer que c'est un objectif en soi, la participation. Troisième recommandation, de mettre en place des formations pour les travailleurs sociaux ou pour les agents des administrations, par exemple, qui seraient animés par des personnes ayant l'expérience de la migration. Considérer que cette expertise, elle permet à des professionnels ou à des bénévoles qui s'engagent d'être plus efficaces et que voilà, cette expertise, elle peut se transmettre, il peut y avoir des temps d'échange de savoir entre les personnes qui ont cette expérience de vie et d'autres qui n'ont qu'une expérience, un savoir théorique ou un savoir d'action. Vraiment, croiser ces savoirs, c'est quelque chose de très intéressant et il y a des méthodologies en France qui ont été développées, notamment dans le cadre des associations de lutte contre la pauvreté, en disant que l'expérience de vie des personnes très pauvres et l'expérience des professionnels ou des chercheurs, il y a des façons de croiser ces savoirs pour construire une politique publique plus efficiente. Les deux dernières, c'est la première d'intégrer des personnes exilées dans les instances de direction des associations à partir de notre observation que c'était encore pas très développé. Et celle qui va avec, c'était une recommandation de créer une instance de consultation au niveau national qui réunirait à la fois des associations et des individus qui interviennent dans les politiques d'accueil des migrants et donc des personnes exilées elles-mêmes. Et au fond, ces deux recommandations, elles ont été reprises par la DIER, donc la délégation dont je vous parlais tout à l'heure du ministère de l'Intérieur, pour n'en faire qu'une et créer un programme qui permette à des personnes non pas de constituer une instance nationale qui, si elle n'est pas présentée régulièrement, connue, ne serait pas assez souvent sollicitée par les pouvoirs publics, mais plutôt un petit groupe de personnes qui ensuite vont aller s'intégrer dans des lieux de décision des associations ou des comités de sélection de fondations d'entreprises, par exemple, qui financent des projets pour les réfugiés, mais dans leur comité d'experts, font très rarement appel à des personnes réfugiées elles-mêmes. Donc voilà pour les recommandations de cette étude. J'ai lu rapidement dans le chat que vous me demandiez de partager ces recommandations. Donc on a publié l'étude en français et publié un résumé avec justement les recommandations dont je viens de vous parler en anglais. Et je pense que mon collègue Mathieu a dû mettre dans le chat les liens, mais on vous renverra ça bien sûr après le webinaire. Parce que là, si je les partage avec mon écran, je ne suis pas sûre que vous pouvez cliquer de façon efficace. Voilà pour cette présentation très rapide et puis à votre disposition pour échanger après. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Just to clarify, we have an issue with the interpreting, which we're trying to fix. So thank you very much for your patience. I should clarify that we'll share the recording of the webinar on the website after today. So hopefully there we should have the interpreting issue fixed and you'll be able to hear things that perhaps you couldn't when your interpreting role was confused today. So thank you very much for your patience and apologies for the technical issue there. Yeah, so just with reference to the sharing the links and so on, I see Mathieu, thank you, has kindly shared the summary of Sophie's report in English. We'll also circulate all of those reports and make those links available on the website too. So now, thank you very much, Sophie, for your presentation. Please do send any questions to me in the chat, and we will put those to the panelists after. And now I'm really pleased to welcome Vincenzo Castelli. Perhaps Marika will be interpreting into French. Vincenzo will be presenting in Italian. Thank you. Vincenzo, please go ahead.
Buongiorno, purtroppo non parlo inglese, ringrazio Marika per la sua paziente traduzione. Grazie. Buongiorno a tutti.
Malheureusement, je ne parle pas anglais en français, mais je remercie Marika pour l'interprétation depuis l'italien. Bonjour à tout le monde.
La mia riflessione è la presentazione di un progetto FAMI per il fondo di integrazione che si realizza in Italia, specificamente in Sicilia, ma anche in altre regioni del sud italiane.
La réflexion porte sur un projet FAMI qui en fait se déroule, qui a lieu en Sicile, mais aussi dans d'autres régions d'Italie.
Sicuramente l'impatto delle migrazioni nella costruzione di un modello di intervento sociale oggi, a mio avviso, è fondamentale.
Certainement, l'impact des migrations dans le développement, dans la construction d'un modèle d'intervention sociale est nécessaire aujourd'hui.
E credo che vada fatto un grande lavoro per la ricerca di un nuovo modello di inclusione in un processo di scambio di reciprocità per superare l'ambivalente concetto di integrazione.
Et je crois qu'on devrait faire un travail de recherche des nouveaux modèles d'inclusion dans un processus d'échange de réciprocité pour surmonter le concept d'intégration qui est en fait ambivalent.
Credo che bisogna lavorare sull'inclusione, non sull'integrazione.
Je crois qu'il faudrait travailler sur l'inclusion et non pas sur l'intégration.
E questo è alla base del concetto di partecipazione delle comunità migranti e delle persone migranti nei nostri paesi.
Et ça est à la base du concept de participation des personnes migrantes et des communautés migrantes dans nos pays.
Ecco perché credo, e i nostri progetti lo dimostrano, che occorre costruire interventi e servizi che non siano specifici per le migrazioni.
C'est pour ça que je crois, et je crois aussi que nos projets le démontrent, le prouvent, qu'il ne faudrait pas construire des services spécifiques en fait, pour l'intégration.
Forse è una grande occasione questa per costruire modelli di nuova generazione per tutti e dunque anche per i migranti, attraverso la loro necessaria partecipazione.
Cela est une grande occasion pour construire des modèles de nouvelle génération pour toutes et tous, et donc aussi pour les migrants à travers leur nécessaire participation.
Ovvero stiamo parlando di noi, in definitiva, ex migranti come i miei nonni in Argentina e i migranti attuali che sono in Italia con noi nelle nostre comunità.
Finalement, on parle que de nous, de migrants précédents, comme par exemple
we are speaking about ourselves. I don't have an interpretation button anymore. My interpretation button has disappeared. Ah, okay, it's back.
Mes grands-parents qui étaient migrants en Argentine, mais aussi des migrants qui sont avec nous aujourd'hui en Italie.
Credo che sia molto difficile però tutto questo, perché costruire una progettazione in questa prospettiva oggi è difficile perché le politiche migratorie a livello comunitario e anche italiano sono state sempre ondivaghe, respingenti e davvero poco inclusive.
Il est pourtant vraiment difficile de planifier, de faire des projets maintenant, surtout quand les politiques migratoires au niveau communautaire mais aussi national ont été toujours incertaines, dirigées en fait et vraiment pas inclusives.
Quando, come ad esempio nella nuova programmazione 2021-2027 dell'Unione Europea, il budget a disposizione per l'inclusione è davvero residuale rispetto a quello sulla esternalizzazione delle frontiere e dei respingimenti e dei rimpatri.
Par exemple, dans la nouvelle programmation 2021-2027 de l'Union européenne, les budgets mis à disposition pour l'inclusion est vraiment très peu par rapport à budget en fait destiné à l'externalisation des frontières, au rejet à la frontière et au rapatriement.
Ci sono dei grandi limiti nella programmazione dei fondi comunitari e nazionali su questo proposito. Ad esempio, gli interventi devono essere realizzati solo a favore dei migranti regolari nei programmi FAMI e AMIF dell'Unione Europea.
Il y a des très grandes limites dans la programmation des financements communautaires et nationaux à ces propos. Par exemple, le fait que les interventions doivent être réalisées seulement en faveur des migrants réguliers.
Ma noi molto spesso lavoriamo con migranti irregolari nei nostri progetti e nel nostro lavoro.
Mais nous, très souvent, on travaille avec des migrants irréguliers dans nos projets et dans nos travail.
In questo contesto il nostro progetto FAMI, che si chiama Prisma, realizzato nella regione siciliana.
Dans ces cadres, donc, il y a notre projet qui s'appelle Prisma, un projet famille réalisé, mis en place en Sicile.
Diciamo che il nostro consorzio Nova sta realizzando in questo momento 4 progetti FAMI Impact nelle regioni del sud, in particolare in Sicilia, Calabria, Puglia e Abruzzo, e quindi quello che voglio dire, un po' i risultati della partecipazione dei migranti è un po' comune a questi 4 progetti.
Le Consortio Nova, l'organisation de Vincenzo, est en train de gérer 4 projets à MIF dans le sud d'Italie, dans les régions de Sicile, de Calabre, de Puglia et Abruzzo. Et la participation est une constante en fait dans ces projets.
Specificamente il progetto Impact persegue l'obiettivo di costruire una sorta di politica inclusiva dei migranti a livello regionale in 4 segmenti cruciali della vita della comunità.
Le projet Impact a comme but celui de poursuivre l'intégration des migrants et s'appuie sur 4 segments principaux dans la vie communautaire.
La qualificazione del sistema scolastico, la promozione dell'accesso ai servizi per l'integrazione, i servizi di informazione qualificata e la promozione della partecipazione attiva dei migranti.
La qualification du système scolaire, la promotion de l'accès aux services pour l'intégration, les services d'information qualifiés à travers canaux régionaux et territoriaux de communication, la promotion de la participation active des migrants.
Su questo ultimo tema mi voglio concentrare rapidamente per presentarvi i risultati di questo lavoro.
Je vais vous présenter les résultats de ce travail.
La partecipazione dei migranti è un'azione per noi stata prevalente e ha avuto dei risultati molto importanti, perché praticamente si è concentrata su 5 grandi azioni.
La participation, en fait, notre focus sur la participation des migrants a été vraiment crucial dans notre travail et s'est déroulé sur 4 actions principales.
La prima è stata un'analisi e promozione dei processi partecipativi dei migranti.
La première, c'est l'analyse et la promotion des processus participatifs des migrants.
Abbiamo realizzato un lavoro di mappatura delle esperienze più significative in Sicilia e con dei questionari specifici, sia rivolti a associazioni di immigrati, ma anche, e credo molto importanti, a gruppi di migranti informali.
On a réalisé un travail de référencement des expériences les plus significatives. On a disséminé, par exemple, une enquête, soit aux associations des migrants, mais aussi aux groupes des migrants informels.
Sono stati altresì analizzati i fabbisogni del mondo migrante su cui sviluppare poi gli altri interventi delle attività.
On a également analysé les besoins de l'univers migrant et après, on a développé les actions suivantes à partir de cela.
Questo ci ha permesso di costruire un Atlante, potremmo dire, di 60 organizzazioni migranti presenti sul territorio siciliano.
Cela nous a permis de recenser environ 60 organisations migrantes actives dans les territoires siciliennes.
E a questo proposito, per esempio, la costruzione di una scuola di intercultura per leader migranti all'interno del progetto Impact.
Et à ces propos, par exemple, on parle de l'école interculturelle pour les leaders migrantes qu'on a développé, on a construit dans le cadre du projet Impact Puglia.
La seconda azione è stata quella della formazione, dell'empowerment e dello sviluppo delle competenze di molti migranti.
La deuxième action était la formation, l'empowerment et le développement des compétences des migrants.
Abbiamo realizzato seminari tematici su cui i migranti ci avevano chiesto di ragionare insieme, di lavorare, su cui in particolare i temi della partecipazione associativa, le fonti di finanziamento per le associazioni migranti, la progettazione, la comunicazione e il fundraising. Questi erano i temi su cui abbiamo fatto formazione, su cui i migranti ci avevano chiesto di intervenire.
On a réalisé des séminaires thématiques sur des sujets que les migrants même avaient proposés. Par exemple, la participation associative, les sources de financement, les associations migrantes, la projection, la communication et la collecte des fonds.
Hanno partecipato 50 persone e in questo credo elemento ci sta dando anche le idee di futuri interventi di formazione congiunta.
50 personnes ont participé et cela en fait nous donne des idées pour des activités similaires dans l'avenir.
Una terza azione molto importante è le reti di supporto al trasferimento di competenze nella società civile.
Une troisième activité très importante, c'est la création des réseaux de soutien au transfert réciproque des compétences dans la société civile.
Cioè sono stati strutturati dei veri e propri tavoli tematici di coprogettazione.
On a mis en place des tables thématiques de co-planification, des planifications participatives.
Con l'obiettivo di elaborare dei veri e propri piani di azioni locali di partecipazione migrante nelle province su cui abbiamo lavorato.
Avec le but d'élaborer des lignes guides d'intégration et des propositions d'un plan d'action locale dans les 4 provinces dans lesquelles on a travaillé.
Oggi abbiamo 4 piani di azione su 4 province della Sicilia: Palermo, Trapani, Catania e Messina.
Nous avons aujourd'hui 4 plans d'action sur 4 provinces en Sicile: Trapani, Palermo, Catania, Messina.
La quarta azione è stato un accompagnamento al capacity building. Credo che questo fosse molto importante, cioè dare attraverso un pool di esperti provenienti dal mondo migrante, dare delle vere e proprie consulenze con dei veri e propri casi di studio di buone pratiche per accompagnare all'empowerment delle associazioni migranti.
Une autre activité très importante, ça a été l'accompagnement à la création des compétences. à travers la constitution d'un pool d'experts provenant du monde migrant. Et en fait, il s'agissait d'une vraie consulence à travers des études de cas, des bonnes pratiques pour contribuer à l'empowerment des associations migrantes qui étaient déjà sur le territoire.
Un'ultima azione è la promozione della rappresentanza straniera nel terzo settore italiano.
Une dernière action a été la promotion de la représentation étrangère dans le troisième secteur italien.
Cioè, abbiamo chiesto al terzo settore italiano, fatto di associazioni, cooperative, fondazioni, di costruire insieme al mondo migrante una vera e propria integrazione all'interno delle associazioni, della società civile siciliana, perché appunto pensiamo che il sistema inclusivo di reciprocità sia l'elemento vincente.
On a demandé au troisième secteur italien, qui inclut associations, coopératives, fondations, de construire avec les représentants du monde migrant un parcours intégré de participation parce qu'on pense en fait que cela est la clé pour une inclusion effective.
Per finire, quali sono stati gli apprendimenti da questi progetti FAMI che noi abbiamo realizzato, che stiamo realizzando nel sud Italia?
Pour terminer, qu'est-ce que nous avons appris grâce à ces projets qui nous sommes en train de mettre en œuvre dans le sud d'Italie?
Noi stiamo lavorando su diversi FAMI, come dicevo, capacity building, i progetti, quelli sull'inserimento lavorativo di migranti, la salute dei migranti, progetti AMIF a livello europeo, tutti questi. Cosa ci dicono rispetto alla necessaria centralità della partecipazione migrante all'interno di questo lavoro?
Comme j'avais déjà mentionné, nous sommes en train de travailler, de gérer plusieurs projets dans le sud d'Italie sur l'inclusion, l'insertion dans le monde du travail, la santé. Et tout cela, en fait, nous confirme la centralité de la participation migrante.
Ci hanno detto le seguenti cose. Primo, un cambio di paradigma. Dobbiamo superare il concetto davvero in cui la migrazione sia una cosa a parte e che la dimensione interculturale diffusa e responsabile non faccia parte di tutto una politica integrata.
Nous avons appris qu'un changement de paradigme est nécessaire, c'est-à-dire qu'il faut surmonter la conception que la migration soit autre chose, quelque chose de séparé. Donc, il faut adopter une approche par les bas pour avoir une communauté qui adopte une conscience interculturelle répartie et responsable.
E dunque occorre costruire piani pluriennali trasversali all'interno delle regioni rispetto ai temi migratori.
Il est nécessaire de construire des plans pluriennals transversales dans les régions pour ce qui concerne la migration.
Il secondo apprendimento è la centralità dei processi inclusivi, dove il tema della povertà, la scuola, il mercato del lavoro, la riqualificazione, i servizi sociali, la salute, le politiche abitative siano integrate insieme.
Le deuxième leçon apprise, c'est la centralité des processus inclusifs, comme par exemple la pauvreté des migrants, l'école de qualité pour tout le monde, le marché du travail, les services sociaux qui soient adéquats et accessibles, la santé, les politiques de logement, les interventions pour la sécurité doivent être intégrées.
Il terzo apprendimento è la ineluttabilità dell'equità e dei diritti. Questo è un tema importante per il mondo migrante, quindi un lavoro di rete sui rifugiati e richiedenti asilo, sulle vittime di tratta e grave sfruttamento, sui minori stranieri non accompagnati, sulla popolazione detenuta straniera, sulle donne migranti, sulle persone in situazioni di forte vulnerabilità. Diritti veri, davvero equi.
Un aspect vraiment important, c'est l'inévitabilité de l'égalité et des droits. Donc, la nécessaire intervention en réseau sur les réfugiés, les demandeurs d'asile, les victimes de la traite et de l'exploitation, sur les mineurs étrangers pas accompagnés, sur la population étrangère en détention, sur les femmes migrantes, les personnes en situation de très forte vulnérabilité. Il faut que ces droits soient vraiment des droits vraiment reconnus e che tout le monde soit égal.
Il quarto apprendimento, la promozione della cittadinanza. Credo che bisogna promuovere forme di cittadinanza attiva, partecipazione pubblica tra migranti, la valorizzazione dell'esperienza del servizio civile per i ragazzi migranti, che è un'esperienza molto importante, il protagonismo dei giovani migranti, delle seconde generazioni. Noi abbiamo delle esperienze bellissime nel nostro consorzio di seconde generazioni, soprattutto di ragazze migranti, di origine migrante. Promuovere le culture migranti come elemento fondamentale del lavoro, di questa promozione della cittadinanza.
I'm sorry, Marika, sorry, 1 second. I just slightly conscious of the time. We're running very behind on the agenda, so I wonder if we could just wrap up in the next 10 seconds. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yes. La promotion de la citoyenneté est un autre élément clé en fait pour promouvoir des formes de citoyenneté active et de participation publique aussi pour les migrants. Vincenzo, possiamo un po' in ritardo?
Ho finito. Ultimo punto, ho finito. Il concetto di costruire processi formativi per sviluppare saperi e competenze migranti. Ecco, questo è importantissimo per noi, creare uno spazio di formazione dove si sviluppano saperi e competenze migranti, che ce ne sono tante di competenze migranti che dovremmo sviluppare di più per tutti noi. Grazie.
Très important, et pour conclure, c'est l'activation des centres de formation pour développer des connaissances et des compétences migrantes. Parce qu'il y en a beaucoup et il faut les reconnaître et les valoriser. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. À tous.
Many thanks indeed, Vincenzo and Marika, also for your interpretation. I'm very conscious of the time. We have some interesting questions and statements and so on that are coming for panelists. I'm just going to hold on to those so that we can move directly to our next panel and hear from all our speakers there. So many thanks, Sophie. Many thanks, Vincenzo. And I'm really pleased now to hand over to Eva Luther.
Thanks, Rachel.
Grazie.
Thanks, Rachel. Hello and good morning from my side as well. My name is Eva Luther and I work for Caritas in Germany as a refugee counselor and as a policy officer for resettlement. And first of all, thank you very much, ICMC, for the invitation and for the organization of this event. It means a lot to us that you put the co-creation by refugees on the agenda. We run a project called resettlement.de and we advocate for meaningful refugee participation for many years now. And I will write a bit of information on our project in the chat box because we are running out of time. Let's start soon with the presentations of Phil Arnold from the British Red Cross, Zaina, an ambassador of the Voices Network, and Lucille Frottier from the Jesuit Refugee Service. If you have questions, just like Rachel mentioned before, just write them in the chat box below. And if time allows, we will pick some of them up after the presentations. And please add to whom you would like to address your question. That is important and helpful for us. So now I would like to hand over to our colleagues from the UK. Their presentation will be about co-production approaches for integration and inclusion. Phil and Zaina, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I just want to say, yeah, thanks so much to ICMC and for the Share Network around the opportunity of sharing some of the practices. I mean, I think after the year we've all had, ending the year on such a powerful, positive conference is fantastic. So yeah, and also thanks so much to Zaina for joining and sharing her experiences of being in the Voices Network. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes just talking around one of the projects that the British Red Cross has been involved in. For quite a long time inside the UK, we've seen sort of services that are delivered to refugees, or policies that are written for refugees, or media articles that are written about refugees. And often within inside that, there's sort of this perception of passive recipients of services.
Excuse me, you need to talk in your microphone because it apparently not loud enough.
Okay, is that any better? This is
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so for the British Red Cross, we were interested in looking at how can we change that to having more inclusive and participatory approaches throughout sort of service design and development. And the Red Cross uses a sort of a definition of co-production, which is largely around sharing power and trying to work collaboratively. So the ladder on the left sort of shows of some of the different engagement techniques that are used, from consultation with people, about informing individuals about rights or engagement, to the higher levels of co-production and co-design. And we were interested in adopting some of that principles inside a project that ran across Europe called the AVAIL program. And this was a program that worked with the Italian Red Cross, the Latvian Red Cross, the Irish Red Cross, and with the Federation of the Red Cross, as a way of testing different participatory approaches in projects to enhance that. So what we did is we did a range of different engagements. There was 8 interventions across 4 different countries. Which included things like a life skills program in the UK, which was designed and delivered by refugees for newly arrived. There was cultural mediation programs in Italy. The Italian Red Cross ran a radio station for newly arrived asylum seekers. There was the Voices program, which Zaina will talk a little bit about today. We ran a program for teaching refugees, teaching languages to host communities. And, in the UK, where sort of language is only sort of, according to the British Council, only 1 in 3 people can have a conversation in another language. We wanted a way in which refugees could share their languages with host communities. And buddying programs that are running Latvia and Ireland with the host community, and sporting programs and engagement events with host community members. So not all these interventions were co-produced. Some of them were more participatory, as an opportunity like the buddying programs, creating space for individuals to choose the activities and ways that they wanted to be involved. In terms of its sort of overall reach, there was about 1,600 people who were engaged in some of these different activities. About 3/4 of those people were people seeking asylum or refugees inside the programs. So just as one sort of example, I won't talk too much around this at the moment because I know Zaina will share some of her experience. We ran a life skills program inside Wales, which was had peer educators from people through the asylum process to share their experiences for newly arrived people arriving in Wales. And that was a way in which, through the peer education program, people could share some of their own experiences, but also get different perspectives rather than just being around service provision, around what it feels like to work through the systems and the processes that people arrive at. So that was a 5-day-a-week course, 5 courses, 3 days a week for 10 weeks that took place there. We also had research that was running alongside. So there was questionnaires that went out. There was interviews, and there was focus groups in all the countries looking at the different areas of research that took place. And what we found was that through adopting more participatory approaches, it would increase the level of understanding, trust, and empathy inside that, understanding the cultural practices. So, for example, when you're looking at issues of disclosure, then that enabled public services to have a stronger engagement process. There was strong areas about well-being and dignity, looking at skills development, looking at meaningful activities for individuals that was getting involved. Also, sort of programs such as buddying programs use the social networks and the social capital within inside host communities to really embed a strong integration process that was taking place. the other aspect was just around the role of independent support. And it was sort of really wanted, obviously it takes time to look at co-production, but the quality of engagement was significantly improved when there was independent support in place rather than letting individuals to take place. I'm just going to pause here very briefly just to show you one of the videos that came out of the program and see if I can share a different screen. 1 second.
You might not have heard about us because we feel we have no voice. We're just ordinary people labeled as refugees, asylum seekers, migrants all across the UK.
But we think it's time now for us to speak out
and be our own ambassadors.
We are here to tell you why no one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark.
We are the Voices Network.
It is not easy to arrive in a new country,
to survive and fight far and away, to be locked out of all unfair education,
to be separated from the people we love.
Try and start all over again in an unfamiliar land. So we are raising all voices to show that really we are just like you. We want to work and give back,
to make change, to learn
and be free.
Our stories should be heard and not told for us.
We speak as experts by experience. Why not work with us?
When you're designing your policies, shaping your new stories,
and improving your services.
We are supported by the British Red Cross, but we do not represent any organizations.
We are independent.
We control our identity and our anonymity. We are the Voices ambassadors.
We are ready.
Are you?
So the Voices Network was one
Those
of...
who actually treat COVID patients are in the center.
Oh, sorry.
Not only have they shown extraordinary courage exposing themselves to the disease,
sorry, let me just... There we are. I think you got that. So yeah, the Voices Network is the initial project activities were only around providing support and training to 40 Voices ambassadors inside the program. What took place was training of almost 300 Voices ambassadors, and the Voices Network were incredibly
sorry,
active.
don't forget to speak on your microphone. Please don't forget to speak on your microphone and slow down a bit, sorry.
Activities that are taking place. And I'm not going to run through everything that was taking place inside the Voices Network, but they set up a Twitter account. There was a blog that was set up. There was huge levels of media engagement. They were helped involved in some of the service designs and development.
Phil, may I interrupt you for a second? Some
Sorry, I couldn't hear you there either.
They can't hear you, so please use your microphone. Thanks.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you either. Are you?
Yeah, now it's better. We couldn't hear you, so maybe you can pick up your microphone and.
Oh, okay. Is that any better?
Yes, it's perfect now.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I'm not going to run through all the activities of the Voices Network, and we'll pass over shortly to Zaina to talk about her experiences inside it. But there was loads of different areas of service development. The Voices Network was more about creating a network of individuals so that they could get involved in a whole variety of different things that they wanted to be involved in. So there was community engagement events taking place, whether it's school assemblies, looking at this New Scots integration strategy work, photo exhibitions, and also organising own conferences led by refugees. There was a range of advocacy activities that were taking place, including in Parliament, trying to influence different advocacy areas of work, and international events, including speaking at the Global Refugee Forum. So there's been a huge level of activity taking place through the Voices Network. And I think it's one of those examples where you start a project with fairly small, providing training and support for 40 individuals to basically create this network that is still moving on today. So I'm going to pass over to Zaina to talk about her experience with inside the network now. Thank you.
you, Dana. Thank you, Phil, for your positive energy and for sharing your personal experiences and your work. We received very positive feedback on the videos, so maybe you can share the second video too in the chat box below. That would be wonderful. Yeah, and now I would like to hand over to Lucille Fortier, and she will talk about promoting refugee participation in rural communities. Lucille, I can't see you. Maybe you can turn on your video. That would be nice. And the floor is yours.
Très bien, merci beaucoup. Bonjour à tous. Donc moi, je vais vous parler en effet d'un programme. Donc je suis animatrice au sein de l'association JRS France, qui est le service jésuite pour les réfugiés. Et donc depuis septembre 2018, je suis animatrice en charge d'un programme spécifique sur le rural et la campagne. Et donc je vais vous présenter voilà, une manière de permettre aux réfugiés de s'approprier les territoires ruraux. Alors, je vais juste trouver le moyen de passer. Voilà, super. Alors, du coup, aux origines du programme, simplement pour rappeler pourquoi on a choisi de créer ce programme au sein de l'association JRS France, c'est qu'en fait, on souhaitait proposer à des personnes des territoires ruraux, donc des familles accueillantes ou d'autres acteurs du milieu rural, des opportunités pour s'engager auprès de personnes déplacées par force. Parce que notre programme principal, qui est le programme Welcome, qui est pour accueillir des personnes déplacées par force dans des familles d'accueil, c'est souvent plus simple en ville. Du coup, on se disait qu'il fallait penser une autre proposition. Et en même temps, en tant qu'acteur du milieu des exilés, on se posait la question des freins à la mobilité géographique parce que beaucoup de personnes réfugiées ne souhaitent pas migrer, ce qui est tout à fait compréhensible, mais on voulait comprendre aussi pourquoi. Est-ce qu'il n'y avait pas aussi une question de représentation et d'imaginaire un peu différent de leur représentation sur ce que peut être le milieu rural. Donc, on a créé des ateliers avec des personnes réfugiées à Paris pour discuter justement de quelles étaient nos différentes représentations du milieu urbain, du milieu rural. Ce qui nous a amené ensuite à choisir un territoire pilote pour pouvoir implanter ce programme. Et ce territoire, donc, ça a été autour de Limoges et plus particulièrement de l'ex-région Limousine. Voilà, donc vous avez la situation sur la petite carte. L'idée très large, en fait, c'est de se dire que le rural peut être un lieu d'ouverture et de possible pour des personnes exilées qui le désirent. Et la proposition, très simplement, c'est de les mettre en lien avec des familles, des associations ou des professionnels du milieu rural en accompagnant ces propositions et en faisant une sorte de pari. C'est que la rencontre permettra peut-être de vivre une expérience belle qui pourra changer les imaginaires et déclencher des envies d'installation en zone rurale. Mais ce n'est pas l'objectif principal, c'est-à-dire que l'objectif n'est pas de vraiment se dire qu'on veut faire s'installer des personnes en milieu rural, c'est donner le choix et ouvrir les possibilités. Voilà. Du coup, on a choisi de s'implanter à Limoges et je vous présente juste, en fait, parce que c'est important pour le programme rural, on s'appuie sur d'autres programmes de JRS qui sont présents à Limoges, notamment le programme JRS Jeunes, dont Sophie de l'IFRI parlait tout à l'heure, qui est un programme de mise en valeur des capacités des personnes et de co-construction. Ce programme, il est très important pour faire le lien avec le programme JRS Ruralité, puisque c'est à partir de ces activités de co-construction qu'on repère quels demandeurs d'asile ou réfugiés pourraient être orientés en milieu rural. Donc, quelles sont les propositions très concrètes du programme JRS Ruralité? Les premières, c'est ce qu'on appelle des courts séjours de découverte. Donc, c'est un volet d'hospitalité. Et en fait, on propose à des personnes en demande d'asile ou réfugiés de passer des séjours courts dans une famille d'accueil qui est installée en zone rurale ou alors dans une ferme grâce au réseau WOO France. Et du coup, le réseau WOO France, donc le woofing, c'est vraiment d'aller donner un coup de main dans des fermes en échange d'être hébergé et d'être accueilli. Et donc, ça permet à la fois de changer d'air, de rencontrer d'autres personnes, pourquoi pas de découvrir un métier, voilà, de faire une pause en fait. Donc, ce n'est pas une proposition d'installation directe, c'est vraiment une première étape qui permet de la proposer à beaucoup de personnes. C'est moins engageant. Et les personnes qui orientent les accueillis, ce sont toutes les structures d'accueil, en l'occurrence là de la région en Limousin. Et on reçoit également des personnes exilées venant de Paris. J'ai mis un petit peu différents profils de personnes exilées pour que vous vous rendiez compte qu'en fait, il y a certes des personnes comme Youssouf, là, la personne malienne qui est en train de faire du maraîchage, qui vivait avec ses parents qui eux-mêmes étaient cultivateurs, donc ils souhaitent éventuellement échanger ses techniques et ses pratiques, parce que c'est aussi son milieu, le milieu dans lequel il est à l'aise. Mais on a aussi d'autres personnes qui sont contentes de pouvoir découvrir ce qu'est la campagne en France et d'en profiter sans pour autant avoir ce désir d'installation. Donc voilà, au sein du programme, c'est très important pour nous de vraiment faire cette dissociation. Le bilan qualitatif, au bout de 2 ans, il est plutôt bon dans le sens où cela répond à différents besoins en fonction des différents acteurs. Pour les accueillants, en général, c'est très précieux une proposition concrète d'action envers les personnes migrantes. Bien sûr, il y a les personnes françaises qui peuvent intervenir quand il y a des structures d'accueil, mais il n'y en a pas non plus dans tous les villages. Et donc là, c'est aussi une belle occasion de rencontrer des personnes et d'apporter un soutien et une aide, malgré le fait qu'ils habitent loin des métropoles. Pour les demandeurs d'asile et les réfugiés, c'est bien sûr une ouverture à beaucoup d'autres expériences. Et les structures et les partenaires qui nous orientent les demandeurs d'asile, donc les structures d'accueil dans lesquelles ils sont logés, sont en général très ravis de ces propositions, puisque justement, une personne en demande d'asile qui n'a pas le droit de travailler, ça lui permet de vraiment avoir une occupation, de rencontrer, etc. Et avec ces bilans, on fait des bilans systématiques à la fin de chaque court séjour qui permettent en fait de se rendre compte de ce que ça peut apporter aux personnes migrantes. Et on pose toujours la question à la fin, et si tu avais l'occasion, est-ce que tu souhaiterais t'installer, pourquoi pas à la campagne, une fois que tu auras ton statut, que tu trouveras éventuellement un travail, etc. Et là, on a quand même beaucoup plus de désir d'installation après les courts séjours qu'en amont, quand on ne connaît pas et quand on ne se représente pas de ce que pourrait être la vie en rural. Donc, pour nous, c'est intéressant en tant qu'acteur GRS France, donc petit acteur dans l'asile, de pouvoir avoir une démarche simple qui peut ouvrir des possibles et qui s'appuie sur notre réseau d'accueillants bénévoles. Le bilan chiffré pour 2019, on a organisé 88 personnes ont pu participer à des courts séjours. Et il y a eu 73 séjours qui ont été organisés, plusieurs dans des familles rurales et d'autres en woofing solidaire, donc plutôt dans des fermes. Et ça, c'est aussi très important pour nous aussi de ne pas réduire le milieu rural au travail agricole, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a beaucoup de possibilités d'installation. Un deuxième volet sur lequel on s'appuie aussi beaucoup et qui a un peu les mêmes objectifs que les courts séjours, c'est le volet d'animation, où en fait là, on propose des journées collectives à la campagne qui est basée sur de l'échange de savoir-faire. Et c'est un peu une pédagogie de co-construction parce que on sollicite en fait des personnes bénévoles, que ce soit des personnes françaises ou des personnes exilées, pour nous apprendre et nous transmettre un savoir-faire. Donc, ça peut être organiser une randonnée et en être le guide. Ça peut être organiser une sortie pour aller cueillir des choses et ensuite les transformer. Ça peut être des chantiers participatifs sur différentes techniques d'éco-construction, de maraîchage, de four à pain, de tout un tas de trucs qui permet en fait de croiser les savoir-faire et croiser les techniques. Et ces sorties et ces animations collectives, elles sont très utiles pour les membres du programme JRS Ruralité parce que grâce à ces activités collectives, on peut repérer aussi qui va accrocher, qui va se sentir bien dans ce genre d'activité et qui on pourra accompagner pour aller plus loin éventuellement vers une installation. Donc, le troisième volet dont je parle aussi depuis le début, c'est l'insertion. Et justement, en ayant les courts séjours et l'animation, on peut repérer qui souhaitera en fait aller plus loin dans une forme d'insertion et JRS Ruralité peut accompagner ces désirs d'installation. Bien sûr, en agissant en partenariat.
Si vous pouvez, s'il vous plaît, résumer un peu le troisième volet et après conclure, ça serait super. Merci.
Oui, pas de problème. Et ben, ce troisième volet, c'est simplement d'accompagner des personnes réfugiées qui souhaiteraient en fait travailler et vivre en milieu rural. Et on s'appuie sur des cas très concrets. Donc, on n'insère pas de nombreuses personnes, mais on essaye de les mettre en lien avec tous les partenaires possibles en étant sûr que c'est une volonté pour la personne migrante. Voilà, donc j'avais des exemples d'accompagnement, mais je pense que je peux conclure comme ça. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Lucille. I'm looking forward to reading the report after the conference because now you had to conclude very quickly in the end. Yes, thank you very much to all the speakers of the first panel. And now I hand over to Rachel, maybe for a short announcement, or directly to Reshad. I don't know.
It's to me. Hi. No,
Hi.
just to say that we're running behind time with our technical issues that we had today. So once again, thank you for your patience. I hope that everyone now has access to the correct interpretation. We have extended the meeting slightly. So for those who are able to stay past 12 to hear the rest of our presentations, we'd really welcome you to do that. And thanks once again for your patience there. We have some very interesting questions, particularly about the participation of refugee and migrant women. And also about the differences perhaps between integration and inclusion that Vincenzo mentioned, and that are important guiding principles for this work. What we'll do, I think, now is move on to our next panel so that we're sure to hear from all of our speakers, and we'll save our questions in case we have some time at the end. So I'm really pleased to hand over to our colleague Reshad from ECRE. Reshad, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. Hello, everyone. My name is Reshad Jalali. I work as policy officer in the European Council on Refugees and Exiles, ECRE. Many thanks, everyone, for being with us so far, and huge thanks to ICMC for organizing this timely event and for rightly choosing the title for this panel, Refugee and Migrant Participation in Policy, Advocacy, and Governance. Indeed, the meaningful inclusion of refugees and migrants at the policy-making level is key to the creation of inclusive European societies. Often, be it at the local, national, or European level, policies are designed and implemented without consultation or meaningful inclusion of refugees and migrants. The so-called refugee crisis of 2015 and 16 increased the need for inclusion and participation of refugees and migrants at the policies and the implementation and the policies that concern their lives, that shape their lives. Refugees and migrants themselves are actively advocating for their inclusion at the policy-making level, be it at the Global Summit of Refugees and Migrants in Geneva in 2018, or the European Summit of Refugees and Migrants in Brussels in 2019, with one slogan, "Nothing about us without us." At the EU level, refugees and migrants are actively advocating for their inclusion or trying to influence the EU policies. Although the integration is mainly member states' competence, but the EU plays an important role in shaping those integration policies via its funding and also via the sharing of good practices and its recommendation. While on asylum policies, the role of EU is prominent. And also the asylum policies have a direct impact on the life of refugees and asylum seekers. The inclusion and participation of refugees and migrants should not be limited to integration policies only. They should be also included and participated in the other policy areas such as asylum policies, return, resettlement, and EU's role in their country of origins. So far at the EU, several initiatives have been taken to increase the participation of refugees and migrants, such as the piloting of European Migrant Advisory Board, which was supported by the Open Society Foundation. Another important area where the refugee participation and migrant participation is so important is advocacy domain. Refugee and migrant-led advocacy is a new form of advocacy that has been emerged from their life experience and also by identification of challenges and the shortcoming of those policies that affected their lives. And they can present concrete recommendation for the policymakers. The refugee rights sector and migrant rights sector can and should recruit more people with refugee and migrant background as their staff, as their member, and also should ensure their participation in all their areas of work. At ECRE, one of the strategic priority of ECRE is to increase the participation of refugees and people with refugee background as a staff member, as a board member, and also in membership organization, as we believe that we should practice what we are preaching. So with the interest of time, I will stop here and I will introduce our three amazing panelists for this panel. Our first speaker is Ms. Nuria Diz Guadia from the European Commission, Ms. Frederick Farabos from the AIR, and Mr. Bekele Wuyecha from the UK Welcome Refugees. I apologize if I pronounce your name not correctly. So without further ado, I would like to start with our first panelist, Ms. Nuria Diaza. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashad. Hello, everybody. This discussion that, because it's something that the Commissioner Johansson, she said repeatedly, which is that there is no us and them. So us, the natives, and them, the migrants, but it's about us. And I think that we need a lot of work still to arrive to that point. And where basically we're all involved, all the locals, be with whatever is our origin. So I think this is something that I like to say just at the forefront. And then to say a bit about the objective, why we created this expert group on the views of migrants, which is basically about a lot about making policies better, about better regulation. So there's this agenda in the Commission of better regulation that that in all policies and lawmaking, there is this realization that we need to make these policies more open and involve and basically more listen to the people that are mostly affected, and then this will make the policies better because we'll be more aware, we'll gather evidence about the needs, the situation, so we can make better policies. So this is a little bit the background, but it's also about civic engagement, which is also about discussing and working together and for the public good, basically. And there's been attention to the need for involving migrants also in the policy in the previous action plan of the European Commission, the 2016 one, and also in the new one that was adopted just before, like in 24th of November of 2020. But already in the previous action plan, there was also this realization, but this was mostly for integration, that listening to migrants will make policies more effective because we'll be more aware of the needs, the real needs, and also the outcomes of integration will improve. So this was a little bit what was behind. And I think that there is also some experience in some countries, like for example in Portugal, they have a council where they involve representatives of the main migrant communities of the country, and they discuss about whole in the Council of Migration about all migration and integration policies. So there are some examples. They are not, but at the EU level there was nothing except a pilot initiative that was done in the framework of the urban agenda. So this was done in 2016, 2018. It was it's a big framework that is really designed to improve the life in urban areas, and also to make a bit take better into account the urban authorities in national policies and in EU policies. So this was a bit the special angle of the urban agenda, and there were many partnerships that were put in place. And one of the first partnerships that was launched was precisely on the inclusion of migrants and refugees. And this was this pilot run for a couple of years. And one of the actions was to establish a European Migrant Advisory Board. So this was a board of advisors who are migrants and who would advise on policy making. They would advise on the activities of the urban partnership. And the aim was also a little bit broader, because it was also about changing the public perceptions and the narrative around migration. And this was a big, we thought it was a very successful activity. And in fact, the urban partnership has been continued. It was initially designed to finish after 2 years, and it's been prolonged. So it continues, it goes on, but not the Migrant Advisory Board, because that was really, really a pilot that was scheduled to end after a year and a half. But we realized that it was, it had been very successful, and we would like to give it a more permanent and a more stable, give it more stability and more permanency. And they also, we also had lots of calls from civil society organizations telling us about this. So it was a lot in the public discussion. There was a lot about how can you make policies without the people concerned being involved. So this is basically then after we decided to create an expert group. And this is what is important to know, is that the expert groups of the Commission, they are already well established. And there's a lot of procedures and rules how to establish them, but there are many. But there was no expert group gathering migrants. So this is what we did. And we did a call for applications. So it was a public call for applications. And we tried to, because it's a Commission initiative, the format of the call, etc., is standard. It's the same for all types of calls. And there are many expert groups that actually target, for example, public authorities or whatever. But it's to the audience we were looking for. So we created, for example, we had an information session so that we could explain people who were interested, because we got lots of questions about the format and what should I fill. It was, yeah, it was quite a process. And then we got nearly 400 applications, like 396 applications. And we did the selection internally. We had initially, we wanted to have 20 experts, and then we decided to have 24, just to have a few more, because it was so difficult to make this selection. But at the same time, we needed to keep a group that is functional, that we can work with and have discussions. So it couldn't be too big either. So we basically selected 24, and some are independent members, and others are representing an organization, representing the interest of migrants. And what was important is that we wanted experts. So we didn't just want migrants to represent the views of migrants, but we wanted them to be experts and have experience and knowledge and expertise, and be it studying, academic, practical, could be volunteering as well. But we wanted basically to select experts, and so this was done, and the expert group was created just in time to make a consultation before the adoption of the action plan on integration and inclusion. So we had a meeting with the expert group. It was the first meeting, and then the plan is to have 3 meetings, maybe 4 meetings every year, and the idea is to consult them on initiatives that are in preparation, so that there is a good time, so that they can give their input and that it can be taken into account. And also, depending on their interest, on their expertise, they can also propose to have discussions and activities. And this first meeting, it was organized, basically it was organized with the Commissioner Johansson, because she was when we proposed this idea of having this expert group of the Commission, she was very supportive and she was very keen, and she wanted to meet. She said, I want to meet this group. And she also wanted to promote the launch of the call for applications so that there would be people interested could apply. And then she wanted to meet the expert group, and because of the time it took to make the selection of all the members, etc., and to have the group up and running, there was a meeting a few weeks before the action plan was adopted, and it was we couldn't share the draft of the action plan at this point. But there was a bit of a discussion about the objectives, the aims, what was intended, and some questions. And then they were invited to respond to these questions. It was a meeting that was it was an online meeting. This is also, so it was short, and there was, it could have lasted 3 times longer because it was very, very rich with inputs and with ideas. And so it was very intense. It was very good. And I think, after that, what we will do is that we'll have another meeting later this year. We were going to discuss the action plan now that it's been adopted, because the point is, of course, first is to listen to the experts, to listen and then is to discuss with them. But we would like to then also come back to them and see what was taken on board, what wasn't taken on board, and have a discussion. Also, some things that were perhaps not written in the action plan can still be taken into account during the implementation. And we would like to discuss also with them, have a bit more detailed discussion of different areas of the action plan, and also about the implementation and how they could support this, because some have said that they would like to be involved also in the implementation. And there's also something because it's a group that was created by DG Home, DG Migration and Home Affairs. But the idea is to also it's a commission expert group. So it's also to serve other colleagues in the commission in other policy areas. So that we would like to also have discussions on different parts involving the colleagues who are working on education, culture, on employment, on social inclusion, and on any other areas. Yeah, so that's. And also what I didn't say in the beginning, but I think it's also somehow linked, is the fact of the fact that in the Commission we are not, as staff working for the European Commission, we are not representative of the societies of society, because it has been a lot of discussion about people working in Brussels being so white, and this is a fact that there's very few people who have who are migrants themselves from outside the EU, or with migrant, or even with other minorities. So I think it's also, in a sense, having an expert group is very necessary. Also, but one should also think about the diversity in public service, to make sure that there are also many other ways so that we can do policies with that everybody, basically people with many backgrounds, contribute to policy making with their expertise and their knowledge. And I think it's a little bit, this is a broader objective of human resources, etc. But I think it's somehow, it's linked, so it's also good to make the connection.
Wonderful. Did you want to say something about the AMIF?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, yes. Also, so we have, under the AMIF, we fund union action projects. So we make calls for proposals normally every year, and in the call that is now running, that will be closing at the end, will be closing in a few weeks' time. One of the priorities is precisely to support in the area of integration, so that's limited to integration, not more, but in the area of integration, to support the involvement of migrants in the design and in the implementation of policies in integration. And there is a component of mutual learning. So because we know that there are, as I said, okay, I mentioned Portugal before, that there is an example. There are some initiatives in other countries or in some cities to involve migrants in policy design. but in other countries there is no experience so far, and this is also, we thought it's a good idea to also put together those who have more experience with those who have less, and so that they can basically find also innovative ways or practices to how to put this in place. So this is one of the priorities that we would like to fund, and we hope to see some proposals that we could support in future. Yeah. About timing and about the nature of the meetings. So perhaps first about the nature of the meeting is that we thought when we were thinking about this expert group, we imagined to have meetings in Brussels in presence, so that we would gather everybody 3 times per year, and we'd have a full day meeting to discuss many things. And this would, of course, this now it's because we have online meetings for the moment, and probably for the foreseeable future, like in the first half of the year, we'll continue with online meetings. So then we make a bit shorter meetings, and a little bit, and we have less. Also, we launched the group like this remotely, so we haven't really met apart from during these meetings. So we haven't had the time also to discuss a bit more, sometimes in smaller groups, to listen to everybody what could be done. So for the moment, we have a bit shorter meetings, and we had already one in January. So so we had the first one in November to discuss some ideas before the action plan, and we had another one in January. And it was because there is a strategy on the preparation by the Commission on voluntary return and reintegration. And the colleagues, because they were finalizing the strategy, we organized this consultation of the expert group on this specific topic. And this was done a little bit quickly in early January because of the timing of the initiative. And then we'll have another meeting foreseen in spring. And it's going to be on legal migration and on new initiatives, but also on talent partnerships. So also relations with third countries on talent partnerships. And then we have the meeting on the action plan to discuss in more detail the action plan, the feedback to the previous meeting, the different areas, the implementation of the action plan. And this we plan it. We're not sure yet if it's going to be just before summer or after or in September, but something like this. And then we are also seeing if there are other initiatives that are in preparation that depending on the timing and where they are, we could have perhaps another meeting, because there's been quite a lot of interest in the expert group also among colleagues. But we don't have yet a work program with all the dates, etc.
Would like to move now to our second panelist for this panel, Ms. Frédérique Farabos. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rashad. I hope you can hear me. Okay, great. So I will share my presentation with you. Here we are. Okay, so thank you for your invitation first. My name is Frédérique Farabos. You pronounced it perfectly, Rashad, so no problem on that front. And I am the education advisor of the French delegate for the hosting of refugees within the Ministry of the Interior. I'm not on the right slide, sorry. This is the right slide. Sorry. And so I will present here a joint project of the Delegation for the Hosting of Refugees, the UNHCR and the French Institute for International Relations. So this project is called an Academy for Refugee Participation, and it consists of selecting 10 refugees who will participate in various sports and juries and have their voice in French public policies. So the context of this project, as you know, the 2016 New York Declaration, as well as the 2018 Global Compact on Refugees, have called for a more meaningful participation of refugees. However, refugee participation is often an ad hoc participation rather than a meaningful one. And so, as Rashad said before, the slogan now is nothing about us without us, as social studies have shown that successful social movements are always led by those affected. So in that context, the DAIR, the Delegation for the Hosting of Refugees, along with the UNHCR and the IFRI, have decided to launch the Academy for Refugee Participation. So what is the Academy? The Academy, as I said, is a group of 10 refugees, statutory refugees, because we belong to the Ministry of the Interior, so we only deal with statutory refugees. And so we are in the process of selecting 10 people. We started off with a social media campaign and a webinar. We launched the Academy on the 8th of October of this year. And we have had quite a few participants already at the webinar. 60 people participated, so there was quite a strong interest from the start in the Academy. Strict criteria, yes, the first criterion is obviously the French language. People have to be fairly fluent in French to be able to understand not only French administration, but also oral French, be able to participate in meetings. And so we're looking for B1, B2 levels in the Common European Framework for Languages. We are looking for people who are or have been involved in associations to help refugees. But we are not looking for experts in the field. We don't want people who to whom the Academy might not be very beneficial. We want people who might benefit directly from the training that the Academy will provide. So we don't want specialists either. We want people who are involved, but not too involved. It's a balance we have to find. And of course, our criteria include quite an equal number of males and females. We're trying to also have people with disabilities. We're aiming for different age groups, different countries of origin, and also different places of residency. We don't just want Parisians. And the selection was carried out by phone. The IFRI, the UNHCR, and us at the DAIR conducted a series of interviews, not just to test the level of French of the candidates, but also obviously because of the lockdown. So we interviewed 230 people. So we had quite a good number of candidates, 230 candidates who applied to this Academy. And we are currently in the final stages of the Academy. Our final selection process will take place on Thursday. So what is the Academy, very briefly? So it's a group of 10 people who we will prepare for 6 months, because in order for refugees to meaningfully participate in decision-making, they must be prepared. And so there will be trainings, mentorship programs to help the laureates get to know the intricacies of the French administration and learn how to speak in public and improve various skills so that they can really be equal partners when they participate in different meetings. So the participation phase will last for a year. For instance, France Terre d'Asile, which is a major French organization, has already agreed to having a certain number of refugees within their board of directors. So we're hoping that many associations and organizations will accept to have refugees within their institutions. And of course, compensation, because as the people will come from all over France, we will pay for the various fees that a few days in Paris might entail. It is, of course, essential to compensate people for their time and their expertise. And so we will cover their fees during the training sessions or during the actual participation in various committees. So, of course, to conclude, the goal is to view refugees not just as victims or mere beneficiaries of our policies, but as real actors of their own lives. And we're hoping for a positive involvement from global actors. It is quite an ambitious program, but we're hoping that various institutions will follow this academy and will include refugees in their meetings. It's a challenge, of course, but we believe that it will be beneficial not just for refugees, but also for the global policy in France, in Europe, and for our societies at large. So that's what I wanted to present you, this academy. So thank you very much. I will unshare my screen. There you are.
Yes, thank you very much, Frederick, for such an interesting presentation. And I'm sure that this Refugee Academy can be replicated as a good practice of refugee empowerment in other member states by empowering refugees to be active member of society. Many thanks for that. And just a quick notice that we will have a quick round of Q&A at the end of the session. So please have your question with you. With that, I would like to now move to our final panelist for this panel, Mr. Bekele Woyecha from the UK Welcome Refugees. Bekele, the floor is yours, please.
Thanks, Ashed, and thanks, Petra, and folks who have organized this important event. It's really helpful because I have learned a lot today. Lots of participation, especially, or the stories I heard were so amazing, and that's what we wanted to do. UK Welcomes Refugees is a new organization. It was only founded in July 2020, but we have been in this for quite a while. And what do we do? And why do we do it? And the reason why we wanted actually to have UK Welcomes Refugees was just because we were keen to bring lived experiences. And when I say lived experiences, it is a bit different. Lived experiences of sponsors and lived experience of sponsored families. It's the experience of us. What does it mean to welcome for a refugee? What does it mean to welcome for those who sponsored families? What does it mean to welcome for a school that avails a place for refugees? So, and then as we formulate policy ideas for implementation in the future, how can we include the voices of sponsors and sponsored families? Because it's really vital to bring the voice of all as we shape our future. So our vision, the UK Welcomes Refugees vision, is a strong participation of the community sponsorship movement, thriving together in an open and welcoming United Kingdom. Thriving together, we can thrive together in an open and welcoming United Kingdom, provided we work together, provided we shape our future together, provided we are around the table while formulating the policy ideas together. So what we normally do is we start with listening. And when we listen to sponsored families, but also we listen to sponsors. And then they listen to among us themselves. So UK Welcomes Refugees is a membership organization, which is really important. And the membership has got different groups in it. As I speak, we have about 5 membership organizations: Caritas Salford, Caritas Westminster, Pickwell Foundation, the Salvation Army, and Church of England. What they normally do is that they do listening. They listen to their members. What is it putting pressure on you? How can we welcome more? How can we be more welcoming? That's really important for us. And so we want to see active participation, as I say, from those who welcome and those who are welcomed. We remember nothing about us without us. In this case, nothing about them without them, because it has to be as inclusive as possible. So what happens is they will have their listening and then come as delegates. They will have done their homework, then they come as delegates. And when they come as delegates for membership meeting, what they normally do is actually represent their organizations. And while they are there to deliver their message. They will be delivering on behalf of others, but they will be there to they will be there to debate. They will be there to compromise. But by the end of the day, they will be, their voices will be included, and the voices of sponsors and sponsored families will be included. So as we are about to go into the new year, we are planning to organize a convention, which is really important. And the convention is going to be, what do you call it, the most important moment for us, as we are going to build our relationships, as we are going to prepare an issue that we are going to campaign on, but at the same time, as we are going to hold those who are going to make change to account, the minister, the home secretary, because there are lots of areas where we are needed. There are lots of areas that need changing. So for all these things to happen, what we at UK Welcomes Refugees encourage is active participation, which is really important. We need to have active participation. For your information, I'm a former refugee myself and director of this organization. It kind of shows you that how much we have gone, but there's a lot to be done. And for that to happen, we have to start it from the outset, from do it, bring all those who are a lot to contribute around the table. If they are not around the table, we always say they are on the menu, and we don't want to be on the menu. We need people with lived experiences to be around the table and bring ideas, debate on the ideas, formulate policy ideas, and then get them implemented. But at the same time, we want people with lived experience to be in leadership positions, in governance positions. Earlier, there were intervention on this area. We need to see that, because people with lived experience have that experience. Somebody who has left their country have the experience of traveling, have the experience of a challenge, have the experience of a lot. The same is true with those who welcome refugees. They have got the experience of welcoming. They have got the experience of integration. So how can we use the best experience of these people for the benefit of building a welcoming United Kingdom and a welcoming world? That's where we wanted to concentrate. So it's all about, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, very well.
Yeah. So for us, it's all about participation. It's really important. I just want to leave that message: participation, participation, participation. And when I say participation, it's all about people with lived experience. And when I say people with lived experience, I am to say on this occasion, people who have been welcomed through sponsorship and people who are welcoming them through sponsorship. So with that in mind, and I know time is actually very short, I will just say thank you and then just wait for the questions afterwards. Thanks, Rashid.
Many thanks, Bekele, for your for your insight and presentation. And I would like to very much echo your point that participation and inclusion of refugees and migrants at the decision-making level. When I say participation at the decision-making level, it means like meaningful participation that improve the results of those policies, that the views of refugees and migrants are being taken on board, not just a symbolic participation of refugees and migrants at the policy level. So I would like to end this panel and give the floor to Rachel for the next session, which will have a quick round of Q&A. Rachel, the floor is yours. Many thanks, everyone, and many thanks for the panelists for being participated in this panel and for your contribution. Thank you.
Many thanks, Rashad, and many thanks to all our panelists as well, particularly Bekele for taking us on holiday by way of your background, which I think everyone is in dire need of at this moment. I see, Nuria, thank you very much. You responded to a question from Ram in the chat there. We have some other questions, but I think what we'll do now is move on to our polling questions, where we ask you to answer some questions to help us. Based on everything you've heard in the presentation so far, and of your experiences of working in your particular context, be that at the EU level, the national level, the local level, wherever it is that you work. So we'll display some questions on the screen. The results are anonymized, so we're not pinning any responses back to you. Please be reassured. And yeah, we will display the results of the polling questions. So they should come up on the screen and you can click your answer. Okay, so you should be able to see here the first question. Can I just check that everyone can see the questions?
Yeah,
Yes, we can see.
Wonderful, thanks. I think we just have maybe 20 more seconds for you to continue voting. Thank you very much for the votes so far. And just 10 more seconds for your responses. You can see you're still voting. Okay, I will be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so my question number 1, my organization regularly consults with refugees and migrants to develop or improve services and activities. So 64% of you said yes, you do that. 22% were more neutral and 15% no. You don't have any consultation in place at the moment. Similar distribution, I think, vaguely for question number 2. Refugees and migrants participate in decision-making within my organization. So again, a majority, I guess, of respondents, 45%. So yes, that is the case within your organization. Slightly higher than the first question, 31% no, there's no participation in decision-making. So question number 3, in my country, refugees and migrants participate in developing the policies and services that affect them. A majority say no, that doesn't happen in your particular context. Another big number, 38%, don't have a particular view, and a very small number agree there, 9%. So there's some work, I think, for the national level, potentially. Here, 69% of you have experience of using co-creation or co-design approaches in your work, which is extremely interesting. Okay. So thank you very much for all your responses to the polling questions. I just wanted to, from our side, we have extended the meeting slightly. I know some people are leaving now, so I think probably it's a good moment to wrap up. From our side, the initial conclusions that I've certainly noted through the webinar, again, a confirmation that refugees and migrants are experts of their own experiences and of the effectiveness of integration policies and programs. I think we heard from all of our presenters the importance of sustained engagement and involvement, so kind of a minimization of ad hoc involvement. And we heard also very strongly the need for investment for dedicated budgets for participatory activities. We heard a lot about particularly in the case of the Academy in France, about the importance of preparation before participation. So there, in the case of the Academy, it was about language and understanding of French administration and so on, and maybe different issues in other contexts. The issue of compensation was raised. This is a complex issue, I think, certainly in relation to donors, funding donors. So that's something that we will take into consideration. We heard a great deal about the value of lived experience and of peer support, particularly from the Red Cross, also from others. And Reshad made very strongly and very importantly the point about meaningful participation. So I'm sure, I mean, in the context of consultation, you're all well aware that consultation is not meaningful unless it's very clear how the outcomes of that consultation have been incorporated into the decision-making that's happening. So that's something else that we'll take away. Just as before I hand over to Petra to close, just to say that we will be sharing all presentations and links to the different practices and so on. So if you've not managed to pick those up in the chat with all the technical messages and so on, then you'll receive those after the webinar. So from my side, thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for your patience with the technical issues. Big learning experience for all of us. And I'll hand over now to Petra.
Well, and a very big thanks to everyone, to all the presenters and the participants to be here with us on this first online webinar for share, and we still have a lot to learn, but we will get there. And it will not be the last one. So we have to learn with this new way of working in terms of polling, consultations, presenting online, how to keep it short but still very impactful. And we have some good advisors in the share networks that I think we have to have a technology subcommittee also within the share network to make that being done a bit better even. Yes, we have the coming years, migrant and refugee participation will be very much included in the share program. We want to make it more consistent and better across the board of the different activities, both in the governance side, in the programs, and we would be very much interested for those that have very practical experience to share from the refugee and migrants organizations to contact us, but we will also do a call for applications on making this participation more consistent the coming period. We will stay with a number of axes of work, and it will be, yeah, what we just said, looking at territories, inclusive territories across Europe. So we will be focusing on a number of regions and locality to see how these practices work on decentralized level. So that will be a big focus. Another thing, what will be a big focus is indeed the private sponsorship growing in Europe and making refugees and also resettled refugees a very big part on that. And then we will maintain our focus on smaller municipalities and rural areas where we will be working in a number of countries to include refugee and migrant participation in this decentralized frameworks. So very much multi-stakeholder engagement. How can we include refugees and migrants in defining pilot programs and defining co-designing pilots? So we will be looking at how can we make actions being co-designed on the ground. So a lot of work. We have reached out to many of your organizations. Not everyone is here, but we had a nice group.
Maybe.
We will continue this discussion with follow-up webinars because we came across a number of very interesting resources and we didn't have time to give the attention to all what we have learned. So I hope by the month of March we will have a second webinar and then already sort of create a path where we think that we like to be going with this knowledge sharing in share. Thanks everyone for participating. Thanks enormously to my wonderful colleagues that have made this happen, to all the presenters, the facilitators. And above all, we wish you a very good end of the year. It has been a very tough year for everyone in many different aspects, for migrants and refugees, even much more difficult to live in these difficult times. We hope to have a positive energy for 2021. It will be a better year. And we love being in touch with you. We love your experiences and generous sharing of your stories and your fantastic work you're doing. Have a very good end of the year. And we hope to see you again in 2021. Thanks very much for being there. And it really warms my heart to see you all. So have a good day.